everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we're gonna make a big bag. We're gonna make a real big bag. We're gonna make a beach bag that is so cool, so much fun, so easy-ish, but also pretty challenging just because of the size. Today, we're gonna make the Bethany beach bag, which is so big, and this pattern comes to us from Handmade. Okay, yeah, this is an empty bag. I did not stuff it, but if you stuffed it, it would be a very round, very large bag. And it is so cool. I'm using nothing but bonded nylon today. Bonded nylon for the exterior, bonded nylon for the lining. I think that that is the best material to use on something like this because you can take it to the beach. It'll stay clean. You don't have to throw it in a washing machine. You just wipe it off. It's gonna be fine. Some of the features of this bag I really love are this little handle on the top here. I've never done something like that before. So it's a Velcro handle and it will hold both of the ends of your straps. You can make it go either way, honestly. You can have it the back side or the front side. I've never made something like that before, so I was really excited to try that. This is pretty much just a giant zip pouch with a base. So if you've done zip pouches before, technically, you can definitely make this bag. However, it is big. I mean, it's gonna give your arms a workout at the sewing machine. Another feature of this bag I love so much that I've never done before is this pocket on the inside. And I know it looks like a basic pocket, but let me show you. Let me see if I can show you. You see how it hangs? I've never done that before. I own a lot of bags that have pockets like this that I've purchased, but I've never made a pocket like that, a little zip pocket that just hangs on the top. So this is a really fun bag to make, guys. So if you're loving the material from this bag, all of it comes from April's bag making bee box. That is a monthly subscription box. I have a link down below going to a video where I really explain what that subscription box is. However, it is perfect for advanced beginners to intermediate sewers. I would say a beginner could make this bag. It's just challenging because it's large. And the nice thing about the bee box is that you get everything. You're gonna get all the webbing, you're gonna get all the material. You're not gonna get that bag tag because that's mine, but you're gonna get the stabilizer we put in the bottom. You're gonna get the hardware. You're gonna get a custom exclusive sew-on tag designed by Jade from the Hardwood and Hide. You're gonna get the pattern and you're gonna obviously get the video. Everybody gets the video. Also, I wanna note that you do not have to be part of the subscription box in order to make this bag. The pattern is available to everybody. You can use your own material if you're interested in this type of fun nylon material. I have a few different sources down below. You can go check them out. I love the bonded nylon from Wonderground Fabrics. There are so many prints and solids, and it's just so easy to work with. So thank you so much to Handmade for allowing me to feature this pattern on the channel. If you haven't checked out their website, go ahead and do it. So many good patterns, some of our favorites. I have them all on my list, every single one of them. I want to make them all. Thank you also to the Bag Making Bee Box for sponsoring today's video. Like I said, more information in the link below. It is a monthly subscription box. It is fantastic. It is a great way also to stuff your stash. So if you're just getting started out with bag making or you've been doing it for a while, you just don't have a whole lot of material, the subscription box is a great way to try out materials, hardwares, all kinds of things like that without you having to go out and like source it from a bunch of different places. All right, guys, let's make this giant bag. Let's get started. So for this bag, you're going to need a yard of your exterior material and a yard of your lining material. For me, I'm going to be using a bonded nylon on both of those because it's perfect, because it's just the most resilient, sturdy material. I don't have to add any interfacing to it, and it's easy to keep clean, holds the structure really nicely, easy to sew. Can't recommend it enough. Then you're gonna need, I would say, like a half a yard of some sort of stabilizer. It is completely optional. This is really just for the base of the bag, just to add a little bit of support to it, but if you don't have any stabilizer, you don't want to use it, you could skip it. So here's everything else. You're going to need some binding today. This is 1-inch wide water-resistant canvas binding that I'm using today. I will show you kind of how I work with that on different parts of the bag. I would say having at least 3.5 yards is going to be recommended. Then you're going to want 4 yards of 1.5-inch wide webbing. You'll need at least 37 inches of a number 5 zipper tape, 2 zipper pulls, and then we have 2 1.5-inch wide D-rings, 2 1.5-inch wide swivel hooks, and a 1.5-inch wide strap adjuster. Then you're going to need at least 5 inches of 1-inch wide Velcro. You'll need both sides, the rough side and the soft side. And then I have a couple bag tags here. I have my little metal bag tag and then a fun bag tag designed by the Hardwood and Hide. Okay, so let's look at our pattern pieces. These are big. It's a big bag. So you're gonna have 2 pieces of your main panel, 2 exterior, which is my print, and 2 lining. If any of this is quilt cotton, make sure you do add some sort of woven interfacing to it. I would suggest, like the pattern does, either a nylon or a water resistant canvas. Next, you're gonna have your base, and this is gonna be 1 cut of your exterior material and 1 cut of your lining material. I do like to kind of mix this up, so I think I'm actually going to use the purple as my exterior and the print as my lining. Whatever you want to do. And you could also, for the exterior for this piece, you could definitely use a piece of vinyl or cork if you would like, again, like a more firm, structured bottom. Next, we have the pieces for our 1 interior pocket. You're gonna have the interior pocket top, interior pocket bottom, and interior pocket back. This is that really cool pocket that just kind of hangs from the inside of the bag. It is a zipper pocket. And then finally, we have our base interfacing. This is a stabilizer, again, optional. I have a small little fabric tab. This is just for the end of the main zipper. And then you're gonna have your cuts of material for the handle. Now you're gonna have 2 cuts. This is using a template. I'm gonna use 2 different cuts just for fun. I didn't add any sort of interfacing to my test project. I don't know if I'm gonna add this, but I did cut out the stabilizer just in case if you wanna make the handle a little cushiony. I think I'll probably give it a go, but we'll see how it goes. And then you'll also wanna make sure that you do print out this piece if you're using just rollers to cut everything out. This is the shaper piece. You will need that to shape the bottom of the bag. Okay, so here's most of the other stuff I'm gonna be using. I have a healthy supply of plastic clips, a pair of snips, a small 1" by 6" ruler, and a stiletto. This is kind of what I keep at the sewing machine with me. Also, the sewing machine is my thread. This is gonna go through the needle. This is size swag, Tex 45 in Pastel Paradise. And then in the bobbin, I'm gonna be using a Gutermann Mara 100 weight thread. And the needle I'll be sewing with today is a Microtex 8012. Then I have my air erasing marker, a seam ripper. I already have a 1" by 6" roller. Well, I've got 2 now. And then I've got my lighter to clean up loose threads. Paper tape is helpful for holding things in place. And then I always have a roll of 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape and then a 1/4 inch double-sided tape. So let's get started with these base panels. You just want to round them off real quick. So I'm going to flip them to the wrong side and then take my little base shaper template and I'm going to line up the 2 short edges with the long edges and then the top with the short edge. And then I can just trace the rounded corners and then just trim down those rounded corners with a pair of scissors. And then repeat this for the other end of the exterior and both ends of your lining. And then using that same shaper tool, round off your stabilizer as well. Now this doesn't have to be too precise. If you want to mark midpoints and get it exact, you can. If you want to just do like 1 corner like that, I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to do 1 short corner and then move this up and line it up with the top and do the other corner. It's just a stabilizer. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you do want to kind of round them off a bit. So repeat this on your stabilizer. So now I'm going to adhere the stabilizer. However, just so you know, stabilizer and bonded nylon can create a pretty kind of ripply, crinkly look that's not desirable. So when I apply stabilizer to bonded nylon or a bag where the exterior is bonded nylon, I never apply it to the exterior material. I only apply it to the panels that are going to be the lining and I let that be the structure. So like I said, I'm going to have the print as the lining this time. And so that's the panel I'm going to stick this stabilizer to. So now I'm just going to kind of line it up a little bit first to see where I want it. And then I'm just going to trace around some of the spots, maybe the corners actually. And this will help me whenever I lay it down. I don't have to focus too much on making sure it's even. And so this stabilizer is just a sticky stabilizer. I don't have to use heat to adhere it. So I'm just going to pull part of the paper off. And I will tell you this stuff sticks pretty quickly, so it's not easy to remove. Once it's down, it's down. So take your time with this if you choose to do it. Once you've got it in place, there we go. Look at the front. All right, perfect. So now our base panels are all ready to go. So now take both of your base panels and mark the midpoints along the long edges for sure. You can also mark the midpoints around the short edges. I don't know if that'll be necessary later, but it doesn't hurt to have midpoints everywhere. So now take both your lining and your exterior base panels and lay them wrong sides together and match up all the edges. And it might be helpful to use those midpoints. And then use your clips to clip all the raw edges together. Again, these two panels are wrong sides together. And now we can take this to the sewing machine and just baste around the entire outer edge of these two panels at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So if you're adding piping, now's the time to add the piping to the base. If you're not, then you can just set this to the side and we'll use it again later. Now we're gonna work on the interior pocket. If you'd like to add your zipper pull now and work on it, you can. I'm gonna add it after the fact because it's just easier to not have to work around it. You're gonna lay out your interior pocket top, zipper, interior pocket bottom, just like this. And we'll move the top out of the way and just focus on the zipper in the bottom for a moment. Take your zipper tape and lay it right side down along the top edge of that bottom panel and clip together. And now using a zipper foot, let's go sew along this clipped edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Now if you haven't already, you might want to grab a lighter and just melt down the edges of your zipper tape, especially if you notice it's starting to fray like mine is. That just can really get in the way, so we don't want to deal with that. Now what you're going to do is you're going to flip the zipper tape right side up. So both the bottom panel and the zipper tape are now right side up, and push the seam behind the bottom panel, getting it as flat as you can along that zipper. And then take this back to the sewing machine and just top stitch along that seam on the bottom panel side at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Alrighty, so now we're just going to attach the top panel the same way. So lay your zipper right side up and your top panel right side up, and then flip your top panel right side down over the top edge of that zipper tape. And as you clip this right sides together with the zipper, just make sure the short edges are matching up with the short edges of the bottom panel as well. Now we can take this to the sewing machine and just stitch along this top clipped edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Once that top panel is stitched in place, press your top panel up and away from the rest, and the seam should be behind the top panel. And then we're going to go back to the sewing machine, and we're just going to top stitch right along that top panel at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance to hold that seam in place. So now grab your zipper pull and zip it on from the right side going towards the left. And now grab the back piece for that interior pocket, and you're going to lay it right side down over the right side of your front piece. And if you have a little bit of overhang from the front piece like I do here on the bottom, see the bottom panel just kind of extends a little bit, that's okay. I'm just going to make sure I match up the top corners and the sides, and if any side needs to overhang, let it be the bottom. If you do have overhang, it shouldn't overhang much. Now if you prefer, you can grab some scissors and just cut off that overhang. If it's just a small amount, you can honestly just leave it and sew it in place. So now I go to the sewing machine and sew along this entire pocket at 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Okay, and once again, if you have not melted off the sides of your zipper tape, make sure you do that. And then open up your pocket and just flip this right side out. Now, yes, the back side of your material is going to be the inside of the pocket. So if that's something that concerns you, we're not going over it on how to do a lining for this, but you could add a lining to it. But with bonded nylon using the back side, that's fine. It's even better if you use like a water resistant canvas. So now I'm going to grab a little turning wand here to poke out those corners. And if you find that you just can't seem to get them poked out, you can always trim down the corners a little bit. I feel like the seam allowance is small enough that I don't really need to. But we're not top stitching over the edge of this. So just focus on the top edge. That's the next spot we're going to be stitching. So now grab your main lining panel and lay it right side up, and make sure you have the midpoint marked on the top and the bottom. And then you're going to grab your pocket panel here, and we're going to have the pocket lay right side up with the zipper right side up. And let's focus on this top edge here. So if you don't already have that top edge rolled out and flattened, go ahead and do that. I'm going to use clips to help me flatten that. And now I want to mark the midpoint on the top edge of this pocket as well. So I'm just going to fold this in half and pinch and mark the midpoint. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to top stitch this onto the lining. Now, the paper tape isn't going to work great with the nylon. So what I did was I measured 3 inches down from the top edge, and I just drew a horizontal line using my air erasing marker. And then I also marked the midpoint using the midpoint on the top. I marked it on that line. I have the midpoint marked as well on my pocket here. So what I'm going to do is match up midpoint to midpoint, make sure the top edge of my pocket is lined up with that horizontal line. And now what we're going to do is we're going to sew a rectangle on the top of this pocket to hold it in place, but only on the top. So this pocket does hang loose, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to top stitch by about 1/8 of an inch away from the top edge of this pocket, and then I'm going to go down 1/4 of an inch, and then I'm going to sew another horizontal line to the other side and back up. So I'm pretty much doing 2 rows of top stitching, one at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, one at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So they're 1/4 inch separated, but I'm also going to connect them on the sides like a rectangle. If you want to use tape or pins, you can. I'm just going to eyeball it. I hope it turns out straight. All right, looks pretty good. And see, and then it just kind of hangs in the bag, which I think is so clever. So as you can see, I did backstitch at the beginning and the end. I also left my threads really long, so I'm going to take all the threads and pull them to the back. And this just adds a little bit more security. And then once I have all the threads on the back, I'm just going to tie this in 3 tight little knots. So now I'm going to add my adorable little sew-on bag tag. And I'm just going to add a piece of double-sided tape to the back of this. And then I'm just going to center it right over the top of the pocket, about 3/8 of an inch or so. It doesn't have to be precise, just not too close to the top edge of the lining. There we go. And now I'm going to go top stitch this on at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then I'm going to just pull the tails on the back and tie them off. Okay, you can set this lining pocket to the side. So now grab 2 pieces of your webbing. Each of them is going to be 28 inches long. And we want to mark the centers. I'm just going to fold this in half. And I'm just going to use an air erasing marker for this. You really just want to focus on the edges, but you can mark it as much as you need to. Just make sure you can see it. And then using those midpoint marks, you're going to measure 2 5/8 of an inch away from each side of the midpoint. So you should end up with marks on the left and on the far right that are 5 1/4 inch away from one another. Do this on both of your straps. And then you're gonna fold your straps. If you have like a design on one side and a blank on the other side or something, you're gonna fold them back sides together and match up those marks and clip. And you're gonna clip between the far left mark and the far right mark. So like I said, about 5 1/4 inch. Now this webbing I'm using right now makes this so easy. There's different types of webbing. This can be tricky with some webbings. It can be hard just to fold it, especially hard to sew it. This webbing, I don't know what it is, but it is so easy to work with, but still feels really durable. So if you're new to bag making, I would suggest you check out this webbing. Okay, so once you have these clipped, make sure you can see the marks on the very far left and the very far right. If you're using air erasing marker, they do erase pretty quickly. So keep an eye on this. And we're gonna take these to the sewing machine and we're gonna top stitch right along the raw edges. So not the folded edge, the raw edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance from far left mark to far right mark. Make sure you back stitch really well, and I would also suggest you tie off the threads in knots on the back as well. Okay, the handles are prepped, set them to the side for just a moment. So now we're gonna work on this handle. And I think I am going to attach this, but to which side? It doesn't really matter. I'm gonna attach it to this purple material because I think that's gonna be like my underside material. And then we're gonna take our 2 pieces of material and we're gonna lay them wrong sides together, just like that, and clip along all the edges. And now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and we're just gonna baste along all the edges of this at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now with the kind of outer piece facing right side up, you're going to also grab your Velcro and you're going to take the rough side of the Velcro and lay it rough side up. And we're going to align it just along the bottom edge. Now you can just lay it there and sew it on, or you can use some double-sided tape, which is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to add some right along the center and lay this down on that side and make sure it covers end to end, just like that. And now we're going to flip this over, and on the, I'm going to call this like the lining side, but the other side on the top edge, so we have the rough end now on the bottom, we're going to look at the top edge and we're going to apply the fuzzy part of the Velcro there. So they're on opposite sides and opposite sides. They're on top and bottom and also on front and back. So using my double-sided tape to help me, I'm just gonna stick this on the top edge there. There we go. So now I'm gonna go to the sewing machine and I'm gonna top stitch these 2 pieces on at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm just gonna top stitch around all the edges on each one of these just to hold them in place. Once you have that top stitched on, look at the back side of the Velcro and trim down the Velcro so it rounds the corner with your material. Do this for both ends. Now we're gonna work with our binding, and let me just tell you, you need to be conservative with the binding, okay? You will have just enough if you have the box. You wanna make sure you don't use too much here. So I'm just going to leave the binding really long and only use as much as necessary. So now with the side that has the rough Velcro facing up, I'm going to attach my binding right side down. And my binding's pretty wide, so I am going to do kind of like a double fold here. But I'm just going to carefully attach this. And I will have, I mean, you might have a little bit of pinching around the corners. I find it doesn't look that bad. If you're really particular about that, I would suggest using an elastic binding. We do that a lot, and that looks really, really nice. And it's perfect for corners like this. But water-resistant canvas works as well. So I'm just going to clip it in place. If you prefer to use double-sided tape here, you can tape this in place. Now you might notice that the binding sticks a lot to the rough side of the Velcro. That's why we want to do this side first. I found when I was testing this out, I did the rough side Velcro second, and it was causing a little bit of a headache. Okay, once you get back to where you started, let it overhang by about 3/4 of an inch and trim down your binding. And now I'm going to lift up the beginning and the end. And on the end piece here, I'm going to fold the short end back by about 1/4 of an inch and then just reclip. And then I'll let the long piece over here come and overtake it like that. So this way, whenever I fold this over, I'll have a nice finished end. So the underside piece needs to have the fold over on the short edge, and the top piece does not. So now we're gonna go to the sewing machine, and I'm gonna sew this binding on at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm gonna use a zipper foot for this and a stiletto. Just be careful around those corners and backstitch at the beginning and the end. So now on this top piece, where I like the ending here, not the folded over bottom piece, but the top piece, I'm just gonna trim the corner down just a bit so that it doesn't peek out. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our binding and we're gonna wrap it around that seam and clip in place. And as it wraps around, that raw edge should now cover the stitching that you just made from sewing it on. And when you go on the side that has the Velcro, make sure if it like wants to overhang a lot, make sure it doesn't overhang too much. So it's okay if it's not like super tight around the seam. It's more important that that Velcro can catch with the other Velcro when you're using it. So it should be just like that. Okay, so now with the underside, so the piece that has the soft Velcro, with that side facing up, I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch at about just under a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so like a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Just make sure you are catching all these edges as you go. Don't sew over any of the edges. Make sure it's wrapped nice and tight. I like to use a zipper foot here and just take your time and use a stiletto, backstitch at the beginning and the end. All right, once you have that all stitched in place, make sure you can wrap it around like this. The stabilizer does make it pretty thick, but that does offer some cushion too. And that the Velcro sticks. You shouldn't have any problem with that. The Velcro is very sticky. Okay, so now take your little handle and with the rough side of the Velcro facing up and on the bottom, measure up from the bottom 2 1/4 inch and draw a horizontal line, and then grab one of your straps. And you're gonna have your strap so that the edge, not the single fold, but like the 2 raw edges are down, and you're gonna line that up with that marked line. So it's gonna be the edges of your strap are right above that marked line, but touching it. So just like this. And just make sure the pinched part of the handle should be pretty much the same size as this panel here. So make sure you have that all lined up. And then I'm gonna grab some clips and clip along the side here. So now I'm gonna top stitch along the little double raw edge down here at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm gonna do a second row of top stitching at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, just kind of boxing it in to make it nice and secure. You could top stitch the entire thing, I think, at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and that would be fine, just like the raw edges and the folded edge. Whatever you prefer. I'm just gonna do 1/8 of an inch from the double raw edge and then a 1/4 inch from that double raw edge, back stitching at the beginning and the end. All right, there we go. Looking good, looking good. Okay, so now we're gonna attach this to the main panel. So I'm just gonna focus on the strap that has the handle on it for now. And what we wanna do is we wanna put some double-sided tape on the back side of each of these short ends. And so the back side, when you look at the handle, you see how it's pinched here by the grab tab here. That's the back side, the pinch side. So we're going to just lay that up and then add a little bit of double-sided tape to this. Do this for both sides of this handle. And now you're gonna fold this back It says by about 1/8 of an inch or so. I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna do it by about 3/8 of an inch. Whatever's easiest for you. The thicker your webbing is, the harder it's gonna be to fold this back. So let's see what mine is. Yeah, mine's by 3/8 of an inch. And as you can see, I'm not that precise about it. As long as it's around that, anywhere between 1/4 of an inch and 1/2 of an inch, you're gonna be fine. I guess that double-sided tape was to tape it to the main panel, but that's fine, we'll be fine. So grab your main panel and lay it right side up. All right, so now on your main front panel or back panel, doesn't matter, on your main panel, using the midpoint mark, measure over to the left 3.5 inches and 3 inches down. And then outside of that, so this is 3.5 and 3, outside of that, what I did was I just took my strap and laid it right against my ruler, and I marked the sides and the bottom like this little kind of bowl shape, and that's where I'm gonna tuck in my strap and stitch it down. Now remember, we have the raw edge tucked under, and so I did the same thing on the other side, 3.5 inches to the right this time, 3 inches down. Again, mark these just like that. They should be separated by 7 inches. Okay, so now on each end of my strap on the right side, I measured up from the folded bottom edge and marked a horizontal line that's 1 1/8 of an inch from that fold on each one of these. And now if you also would like to add some double-sided tape here to help, you can. You can just add it right to the back of your fold over here. And it's totally optional. I don't add a whole lot of tape, but it can be helpful. So now I'm just gonna take one of my ends here and remove the paper from the double-sided tape. And then just tuck it into my little marks right there. There we go. And I like to also just make sure it looks straight and clip it to the top of the panel as well, so I don't have to worry about twisting on me. And now I'm gonna go to the sewing machine and I'm gonna top stitch along the 3 edges, so the folded over edges, the 2 raw edges, and then right over that marked line. And on the sides and the bottom, I'm gonna top stitch at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm also gonna top stitch an X going through this rectangle, so I will be going over some of these lines multiple times. It is what it is. Just try to start and stop at the same spot, even if that means you have to go over the same bit many times. And I do like to backstitch at the beginning and the end, and also tie the threads off on the back. I'm gonna do this for both of my ends of my strap. And once again, just make sure you check that your strap is not twisted. All right, there we go. So this is how the handle is gonna look. You're gonna take your other main panel and your remaining handle that does not have the handle tab on it, and you're gonna attach this the exact same way. So repeat that process exactly for the back panel. I'm gonna do that off camera. Okay, so once you have both of your handles attached, they should look just like this. I know it's really big, but one handle is just on its own and one handle has the little grab tab on it. I am going, either one of these can be your front panel. I'm gonna say the one without the grab tab is the front panel, and I'm gonna attach my bag tag to this one. Now for my bag tag, I'm just gonna line it up right directly between my 2 handles, so I just use the bottom of the handles to figure out where to put that, and then I have my little washer here, and I'm just going to line it up centered using the midpoint mark and the bottom of those 2 handles, and I'm gonna mark slits for the prongs. Now if you're doing a sew-on tag, you can just sew it on. I'm using a scrap piece of the stabilizer as well. Bag tags, like metal bag tags like this, can use that stabilizer to prevent it from ripping the material over time. And now I'm just going to very gently seam rip along those 2 slits on the main panel and also on my stabilizer. And then with metal bag tags, I do like to add some of this Beacon 3-in-1 glue on the back so that it doesn't pull off or have those metal prongs break at any point. There we go. So I'm gonna insert this where my slits are on my main panel. And just give it a look from the front. That looks good. Flip it over. Now I'm going to take the sticky part off of this stabilizer. If you have a fusible stabilizer, you don't have to fuse it on. You can just apply it over the prongs. And I'm just going to insert the slits like that. And then grab my washer and lay it down. I'm going to push the prongs in on themselves. Let's take a look from the front, make sure it's the way we want it. That looks cute. And then I also like to grab just a small piece of duct tape to put over the prongs of that metal tag and the washer so it doesn't rub against the lining and create a hole. There we go. Okay, set this to the side for just a moment. So now take your 27-inch piece of zipper tape, lay it right side up, and you're gonna measure 1/2 inch from one edge. And just mark along the sides. And then on that one side that has the 1/2 inch marks, you're gonna separate the zipper teeth and pinch right at that 1/2 inch mark so that the coils rotate up and away from the center. And then you just fold it like that. So do this for both sides. Now you can tape this, you can hand baste it, you can use a lighter to melt it to hold it together. I'm gonna take it to the sewing machine, yeah, and I'm just gonna baste along both of the raw edges over here to hold this corner curved out from one another at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have that basted, make sure you also melt the sides so that the fraying doesn't cause a problem later. There we go. It doesn't have to look pretty, it just has to be away from one another. And then grab your zipper pull, and from the opposite end that does not have the fold, you're going to insert your zipper pull. Just pull it all the way up, and you can give it a try. When you pull it all the way to the end, you should see it doesn't come off. So, just like this. So now grab your zipper tab, and on each of the long edges, you can add a little piece of double-sided tape if you'd like. If you're comfortable just sewing it on, then you don't have to add the tape. But what we want to do is we want to take those two long edges, we want to fold them wrong sides together and just hug it around the very edge of our zipper, just like that, to cover the end. So before I do that, I am going to melt down that zipper tape. And then I'll take the paper off of both pieces of double-sided tape. And then carefully just kind of fold it a little bit and hug it around this edge, making sure both the long edges are lined up at the same spot. There we go. And now I'm just gonna top stitch right along the edge of the raw edge of my material at an 1/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Okay, so now grab your exterior front panel and lay right side up and pull that handle down towards the center. And then grab your main zipper, and you're gonna lay your main zipper right side down on top, just like this, and centered. Now, if you'd like, you can mark the midpoint on your zipper tape, which is what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna fold it in half. I'm not gonna use scissors for this. I'm gonna use an air erasing marker. And you can mark it on both sides, and you can mark it on the front and back as well. Okay, so with the zipper closing towards the left, so the zipper tab is on the right, the open end of the zipper is on the left. Lay your zipper right side down, match up those midpoint marks with the main panel and the zipper, and clip together. And just clip this along the top edge of your panel. Now I am going to take an extra step here, and I'm going to baste this zipper down at an 1/8 inch seam allowance along the entire clipped edge. Now grab your main lining panel that does not have the pocket, and you're going to lay it right side down, top edges together, and line it up with the top edge where your zipper is, and clip together. So the zipper is sandwiched in between the lining and the main panel, which are facing right sides together. All right, once you have that clipped together, we're gonna sew along the top clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Make sure you're using a zipper foot. Once you have that sewn, flip both your lining panel and your main panel, your exterior panels, wrong sides together. And this is where it gets a little tricky just because it's so big. But we're going to do our best to get it all together. Now, if you want to use an iron, you definitely can, to try to flatten out that seam. I'm just going to flatten it out at the sewing machine. The nice thing about something this big is that if it's not perfect, it's not noticeable. It's not a super structured bag. So you see now, we're going to flatten out this seam by the zipper, and then take this back to the sewing machine and top stitch along that seam, holding it down at an 1/8 inch seam allowance, making sure you back stitch at the beginning and the end. All right, so you have one side attached. Now we're gonna repeat that with the back panels. So I'm gonna grab my exterior back panel, and I'm going to lay it right side down, making sure that strap is out of the way, right sides together with my zipper tape, and match up at that midpoint mark and clip right sides together. And you might find this easier to flip over. So you're looking at the back of the zipper tape, since the zipper tape is not as wide as the main panel. And now you can take this to the sewing machine and just baste along that top clipped edge at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Once that's basted on, lay your zipper wrong side up and grab your remaining lining panel that has the pocket and lay it right side down, so right side against the wrong side of the zipper. You know, the zipper pulls over there. And make sure your pocket is at the top, and match up along the top edge and clip together. And now let's sew along that top edge, sewing all 3 layers together at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Okay, you might notice it's starting to get a little tricky now. Again, it's just because of the size. This is not a very technical bag. It's nothing too difficult, it's just big. So I'm pressing the lining panel away from the zipper. And I'm also going to press the back panel away from the zipper. And then make sure you have your front panel combo out of the way as well. And then with the exterior and lining panels pressed wrong sides together, finger press along that seam, and then take this to the sewing machine and top stitch along the seam at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end, and make sure your other side, your front panel and lining, don't somehow sneak into the stitching. Okay, that really is the trickiest part, just because it's so big. So now, you could have done this all in one step, but now what we want to do is we want to baste the sides and the bottom. So exterior back panel to lining back panel, wrong sides together. This is a bag that is bound. We are not turning it right side out, through birthing it or anything. So get all your edges lined up and clip together. Okay, now take this whole unit, this giant unit, to the sewing machine, and along both the front and back combos, baste along the sides and the bottoms, all at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, just to hold it all together. It'll make the next step much easier. Now, once you have all that basted, take your main panels and flip them exterior right sides together, just like this. And let's focus on the sides, okay? So line up the side edges and use your clips to clip these. So you have the lining on the outside and the exterior on the inside. And we're only focusing on the side edges right now. Now we're going to sew along both of these sides at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitch well at the beginning and the end. You might want to use a zipper foot for this. You probably don't need to though, but just take your time, back stitching really well. Okay, now I'm not going to trim down these sides because my binding is 1 inch wide, so I should be able to wrap this around without problem. Yep. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my binding and I'm going to fold my binding wrong sides together, long sides together to get a midpoint fold. This is a little bit of extra work, but it's going to help out a lot when you're attaching the binding. So then on the top edge of my binding, I'm going to fold the little short edge back, wrong sides together, by about 3/8 of an inch. And then I'm going to fold the binding in half again. And then I'm going to wrap it around the top edge of my side. And I like my binding to kind of just come up above the top edge by like less than 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, just barely up there, and clip in place. And now I'm going to go along this side edge, clipping along the side, using that midpoint fold as like the guide to go right on the top edge of that seam. If you want to use double-sided tape on one side, you definitely can. That can make things easier. But I'm not going to. I'm just going to hug and wrap and clip. And then once you get to the very bottom, you can just cut your binding right at the edge. You don't need to wrap anything under because that's going to be sewn into place in the next step. So there's one side. Repeat this with the other side. Okay, once you have these clipped in place, I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch each side of our binding on at about a scant 3/8 inch seam allowance. So anywhere between a 1/4 inch and a 3/8 inch seam allowance. You don't want to go bigger than the 3/8, but 1/4 inch is totally fine. You don't have to cover the stitching with your stitching. So back stitch at the beginning and the end. Take your time. A stiletto is really helpful with this. All right, it's all coming together. Now we just have to add the bottom. So take your bottom panel and you're going to lay it so that it is exteriors right sides together. Now this is a little confusing because the exterior of my bottom panel is the purple, okay? So exterior to exterior, use those midpoints to line them up. The lining side of my bottom panel is the print because I like to be difficult. So I'm going to match up those midpoint marks on the long edges first, on the front and back. And then I'm going to go over to the side and I have my midpoint on that short side. And I'm going to line that up with the seam. Now, I'm just going to fold the seam allowance that's bound to one side. Doesn't matter which side. You're not pressing it open. But match up the midpoint with that seam and clip them together. Do this on the other short edge as well. And then once you have all your midpoints together, you're just gonna go and clip around the edges. Now, I don't find that I have to really clip into anything to get it to spread around the corners, but if your material is really tight and you're having a hard time getting the main panel to kind of go around this corner, you can cut little tiny slits, like you just cut like a little tiny, like 1/8 of an inch slit into the main panel so that it can spread as it goes around that rounded corner on your base panel. But don't cut into the base panel. Okay, now once you have it all clipped in place, with the base panel facing down on the bed of the machine and the lining panel facing up, you're gonna sew along this entire clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Be careful here. I do find a zipper foot is helpful with these types of curves. If you find that you're having a really hard time with the main panel spreading around the curves, use your scissors, cut in little, just like 2 or 3 at the most, to allow it to spread as you go around the curve. Backstitch at the beginning and the end and use a stiletto. Alrighty, that's a big bag. So here's the thing. If you struggle with those corners, like I have some pinching on those corners, before you kind of get upset and start unpicking, just take a look on the front. Because this is such a big bag and it's such a floppy bag that, like, if you have a little bit of pleating anywhere, it's really not that noticeable at all, again, because of the size. So don't worry so much about perfection. So the last thing we have to do with the bag is attach the binding. Okay, so just like we've done before, pre-fold your binding, long sides together, wrong sides together, and then just wrap it around this edge. So I know when I sew the curves on, I have a tendency to kind of increase my seam allowance. So if you find that as you are trying to wrap the binding around the curves, that you can't get it to cover the stitching, you can trim down the seam allowance on the curves just a little bit, just like 1/8 of an inch. And then when you get to the side seams, just cover that fold over. So it's gonna be a little bit thicker there. So just remember that when you go to the sewing machine, that you might have to kind of decrease your seam allowance at those thicker bits. Once you get back to the beginning, you can just have this overlap by about 1/2 of an inch to 1 inch. I don't fold over anything. There we go. And now once again, with the bottom panel facing down and the side, or the lining side facing up, I'm going to top stitch this binding in place at about a scant 3/8 inch seam allowance. Some spots I might have to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance where it's a little bit bulky. I'm gonna use my stiletto and a zipper foot and just go nice and slow, sewing this all down, and then you're done with the bag. Alrighty, once you have that sewn on, just flip it to the bottom and make sure you caught all the corners. Everything looks good. If you didn't or you got too close, you can just go a second row of stitching just a little bit closer to the edge to catch it. You just want to make sure you catch the binding. You don't have to unpick anything, just redo it. Now we're just gonna flip this right side out. I mean, it looks cool lining side out too, doesn't it? Alrighty, how cool is this bag? Isn't that beautiful? So let's poke out the top corner. So you see, you can zip it up, and then you can take this handle and wrap it around, and you can go like that, or you can wrap it around like this. You have the handle on top, which is kind of cool too. Either way, so many options. I love this bag. It's so cool looking. The last thing we have to build on the bag are the D-ring connectors, and these are attached after the bag is completed. If you want to use rivets here, you definitely can, but I'm going to show you how to sew it. So grab 2 of your webbing pieces, each is 4 inches, and you're going to thread it through each of your D-rings, and you're going to fold them wrong sides together just like this. Now if you want to use some double-sided tape here, you definitely can. So I'm just going to add a little piece on the back of the webbing, take the paper off, fold up one edge of my webbing so it covers about half of it, and then the other edge will cover the other half. It doesn't matter if it's not directly in the center, it's just as long as it's on the back. And I'm also going to add some clips here so it doesn't pull it off. But this webbing is actually really great for this because it's not super stiff, so it doesn't pull away from it, which I am loving. I love when we find new stuff like this. So I'm going to do this on the other side as well, just having half of that edge go on the tape and the other half go on there too. Here we go. And also add clips. Okay, and then I'm gonna add another piece of double-sided tape, just kind of along the center, but not all the way up to the fold. I wanna make sure this is all gonna be hidden in the end. So this is on the back here, where I have those raw edges. And this will just be to help hold it on the bag while I stitch it in place. Now, looking at the side seam of your bag, we're gonna start with the easier side, which is the open end of the zipper. Looking at the exterior, grab a ruler and measure 3 inches down, centered over that side seam. And then just mark a horizontal line that you can see. There we go. What you're gonna do is you're going to take your D-ring connector, and with the D-ring facing up towards the top of the bag, you're going to just line up the top edge right underneath that marked line and tape it in place, and then we're gonna sew it in place. So I'm gonna remove the double-sided tape here, and this might also just be easier to do at the machine. And yes, you are sewing over the side seam binding. So on the inside here, you might just wanna push it to the side. Do your best to keep it centered. Again, it is a very big bag, so if it's not perfectly centered, it's not going to be noticeable. And now with everything held together, we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along the edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Also top stitch right underneath the bar of your D-ring using a zipper foot here. And then I'm also going to top stitch a little X going through it, just like I did with the handles, starting and stopping at the same spot, back stitching at the beginning and the end, and then tying off the threads on the lining side when I'm all done. Okay, I'm gonna go fix this. I just wanted to show you. It looks pretty good on this side, right? When I flip it over, I stitched my handle. My handle got in the way. This is why this is difficult. It's not a difficult thing to do. It's just so big and there's so many things. It's really hard to keep everything where it needs to be. So unfortunately, I will have to seam rip the stitches here and just redo it. Okay, so I redid it, and it is now not attached to the handles. Now we're gonna do the same thing on the other side. The other side is just a bit trickier because you have that tab up there. Honestly, it's not too hard to sew these on, as long as you pay attention. But it is very hard to show it on the video because my bag is just so big, it kind of blocks what I'm trying to show you. But I'll do my best to show you this again. So once again, I'm just marking 3 inches down. Honestly, this double-sided tape doesn't really do anything, but that's okay. And then I'm just going to push this on here. Once again, I'm gonna push the seam allowance to one side. I like to kind of try to match it up with whichever way it's being pushed on the bottom, but it's far enough away, it doesn't really matter. And then once again, we're gonna top stitch along the edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance using a zipper foot, go underneath the bar, make a little X, back stitch at the beginning and the end, tie off the threads, don't sew in your handles. You got this. Okay, we did it. I didn't sew in a handle, thank goodness. So now we have the D-rings attached. This bag is so cool. It's so stinking cool. I just love it. Okay, now we can set this to the side and we're gonna work on the crossbody strap. So I cut my webbing about 54 inches long. If you like a longer strap, you can go up to 60 inches. If you like a shorter strap, you can go 50 inches. I wouldn't go shorter than 50 inches. So I'm going to sew my straps together, but if you like to use rivets, you can do that. So I'm gonna start with my strap adjuster, and from the bottom, I'm gonna put my webbing up and over that middle bar. Then I'm gonna fold the end of my webbing in on itself by about 1/2 of an inch. And then I'm gonna fold this all down by about 1 inch. And this is just totally eyeballing it. Might be just a little bit more than 1 inch. It doesn't need to be precise here. You just need to have room to stitch. So now I'm gonna pull the strap adjuster as far as I can away from this fold over, and I'm gonna top stitch a little rectangle here, 1/8 of an inch from the fold and 1/8 of an inch from the sides, and then just right underneath that strap adjuster, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Use a zipper foot. Now with the folded over side up, keep your webbing straight, grab your swivel hook and thread it on so it's hook side down. Thread it onto your webbing. Pull both ends of your webbing together so it's the raw edge against the folded over side, and on the bottom of the adjuster, slide it up and over that middle bar. There we go. So when you stretch this out, you have a hook on a fold, you have the adjuster in the center, and you have your raw edge over here. Grab your remaining swivel hook and swivel side up this time. fold down that raw edge by about 1/2 inch and then fold it all over again by about 1 inch, just like we did on the adjuster side. Grab a couple clips to hold it in place. And then take this to the sewing machine and once again top stitch along the sides in the fold at 1/8 inch seam allowance and top stitch right underneath that bar, back stitch at the beginning and the end. And there you go, easy peasy strap. You can just add it onto your bag and you are done. How stinking cool is this bag? And it's so big, but this is such a fun bag to make. I hope you guys love it. All right, what do you think? It's not that bad, right? I mean, it actually comes together fairly quickly. It's pretty basic. They don't have 1,000 pockets. You don't have a lot of hardware to work with. It comes together really, really nicely. And you have an enormous bag, which is perfect for summer travel, spring travel. I'm going to be going on a cruise soon, and this would be perfect for cruising because I would use this as my beach bag because it folds up really nicely. Let me see. I'm just going to try to fold it all up. This is not like fancy right here. But look, I mean, you can just fold it up nice and neat, roll it in your suitcase, and then when you go to the beach, just put all your stuff in it, all the wet stuff, let it dry out. It's no big deal. It's effortless, which is the type of bag that I need as a mom. I need a bag that's not going to require me to spot treat it and put it in the washing machine and soak it, and all these things. I need something that is easy. Life is hard enough. I need something easy. So I hope you love making this bag as much as I do. If you make this bag using the tutorial, please make sure you tag me. If you make this bag at all, make sure you tag Hills Handmade. And if you are making this bag with the bag making bee box, I want to see your version. Are you switching up the fabrics? You can use the lining as the exterior, just like I did on the bottom here. You can switch it up however you like. I want to see your version, so make sure you also are tagging the Bag Making Bee Club. I hope you're having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.